All right, so welcome back. This week we've got, or I guess this month we've got the Cats of Ulthar. So I'll be narrating over my painting of this. Originally, it took probably close to 9 hours or so. I think that the video after the hyperlapse is about 30 minutes. So that it's sped up a lot, but I still wanted to try to break some things down so you guys could kind of see the process and what's going on. So I guess let's get started. All right, so bringing up the sketch that I had done originally, and as you can see, I've got a reference image that I created in what is that called? Skull Sketcher, I think is what it's called, where you can kind of position skulls and change lighting and stuff like that. So I use that to kind of get the angle that I wanted and get like that old school horror lighting, or to me it feels old school horror. It just reminds me of like some of the old like Italian horror posters, and I really like that feel. So I kind of brought that into this image as a whole. And so I've got here I'm blocking in a lot of the backgrounds just to kind of get things kind of started, and so I've got the cat, and I've got it with 5 eyes, even though there's no mention of that in the story, Cats of Ulthar by H.P. Lovecraft. But I've always been a big fan of like the cover art being like really, really cool and interesting, and like really drawing you in, making you want to read, what's inside the cover. So I kind of just went that route of what I thought would be kind of interesting and what would pull people in. So again, I'm still pretty much using the watercolor brushes that I've been using recently with like Elvira and the Herbert West Reanimator. Just laying in a lot of color, and then using the blend tools and blending a lot of that stuff. Here I'm starting to work in the details of the teeth on the skull, obviously, and it's one of those things where you're always, or I guess I'm always kind of all over the place. As you've seen, like I block in huge chunks, and then I'll go in and start to focus on one spot, and then you kind of see how that looks and see how it's feeling. And a lot of the time when I'm zooming out like that, I've mentioned this before, but it's kind of as if you were doing a painting, on canvas on an easel, and you paint, and then you kind of take a few steps back or a bunch of steps back if you have the room, and just kind of take a look at it from another perspective to see how it's looking. That's kind of what I'm doing with the zooming out. So so here I'm adding more space. That's one of the things I love about digital. Like you can just adjust things forever. I guess that can also be a bad thing, but usually, if you're smart about it, you can not get sucked too far in and not just make changes forever. Like, at some point you have to know when the piece is done, or you might have an art director that's telling you the piece is done, depending on what you're doing it for. So here I'm still starting to go in and work on the skull some more, get some of those highlights going. As you can see, I've got a lot of just like the base color laid in here. And like a lot of paintings, like, you kind of lay in a lot of stuff, and then you might end up painting over it or pulling it out and redoing it. Like there's a lot of purple on the face of the cat on the right side. A lot of that will get painted over and removed, as you'll see as we move on. But you got to start somewhere. So you start blocking things in and seeing what feels good. And since I didn't have a reference for the cat for the most part, I mean, I had a little bit of a drawing of a similar pose, but it's hard to find references for cats with 5 eyes with, you know, purple and blue lighting on them. So I just kind of found something that was kind of similar and just kind of basing it off of the lighting and stuff from the skull. So here I'm starting to work in some details on the hair of the cat. Again, like, there's no rhyme or reason to when I start working on more details. It just, sometimes if you can start to, or for me anyway, if I can start to work in more detail, it makes me feel like I'm making more progress, and like I'm, you know, it's like baby steps basically, you know, like I'm laying something in, so I'm getting something done. So there's progress. Even if I end up painting over it completely at some point, or, you know, painting it out or hiding the layer, whatever, depending on how you're working, like, at least I'm still moving, you know, and still making some kind of progress. And I think that's something that is kind of important, is not getting too hung up on something and just not making any more progress with it. Is just try to always keep building. You know, you can always redo it, you can always repaint it, whatever you need to do. But I feel like just making sure that you keep on working on it is really important, because otherwise you end up with a bunch of paintings that are not done, and that can be really frustrating, because especially if it's physical paintings, because they just end up stacked up somewhere and they take up space, and yeah, it's not as fun. At least with digital, you can hide the files or just shove them on a hard drive somewhere and hide them, but I don't know if that's great either. But so here, like I was talking about, I'm blocking in a lot more of the blue over top of the purple of the cat's face, and then just kind of going in and blending some of it. Unfortunately, I work with quite a few layers. I'm trying to get better about having so many layers, because it starts to get just a bit confusing and time consuming as you keep going, because like sometimes I want to make changes just to one thing, but it's like something I want to remove, and then I need to figure out which layer it was on, because I didn't name the layer because I was in a hurry, and I just clicked new layer and then kept on going. So I'm trying to get better about using less layers and just painting more as if it's a painting. It's just, sometimes it's hard to do because the digital format is just so forgiving. You can just make changes forever, especially if you have the layers set up. So I don't know if you just saw it. I just did a rotating of the screen, which I don't do a whole lot, but it does come in handy for some things. But it's just holding down the R key and then moving the mouse or your Wacom pen or whatever you have. But it comes in handy, and I really like it because it makes me feel like I'm drawing on or painting on paper or canvas again, like I used to do when I was younger. Like it gives me, that freedom to actually rotate whatever I'm painting on, which with digital is, I don't know, that wasn't an option for a while, and eventually Photoshop brought that option in, but it definitely makes it feel a little more real, like it's like you're doing physical work, which I kind of like. So here I'm doing a lot with the shadows and the midtones, and you'll see them. They're kind of, it looks like they're blinking. That's just because it's sped up so quickly. But I'm trying to figure out like a good opacity for the shadows. Like, how dark do I want them? How dark do I want the midtones, and should I leave them darker and then paint over top of them to lighten them up? Because I still do want it to look like cat hair, so, and it's supposed to be basically a black cat, but I'm painting it with blues, but that's just because of the piece. Like, overall it's a blue piece, but just trying to figure out like how dark are the darks going to go and how dark are the darkest darks, because there's also like the cosmos in the background, and I can't go that dark because then it'll end up looking like the cat's like transparent, and that'll look silly. So most of the background colors are more of a purple, really close to black, but purple kind of darkness to them, which is usually kind of how I paint when I paint acrylics or oils. If I'm painting something that's really, really dark, like I'll use like deep purples. I very rarely actually use just a solid black because it usually feels too flat. Like sometimes I'll add some black to it, but it's usually based off of some combination of a red and a blue whenever I'm doing really dark darks, unless, and like mimicking old school religious paintings, and they seem to like, they're really dark browns with their reds mixed in. But for most of the stuff I'm doing, it's usually like a deep purple. So here I'm putting in some purple reflection on the skull. So we've got this really strong purple light on the right side coming in from the right side. So adding in some reflection there, and then cleaning up the claw here, or the paw, I guess it's called. Cleaning up other details. Eventually you'll see I'll end up going in and grabbing it's the cat's front right paw on our left. I end up grabbing that and scaling it up because I don't really like the size of it, but that was something that took me a while to notice. It just wasn't quite feeling right. And so, yeah, again, blocking in a lot of darks and then going back over it, with a smaller brush to add detail for the hair. That's always kind of fun, is like getting the hair detail in there and like being able to lay it over top of mids and darks to have it really seem like the light's bouncing. And here I'm cleaning up the back paw of the cat. It's kind of wrapping around the skull and holding on to the eye socket while it's cruising through space. And again, it doesn't have anything to do with the story, the actual story, but I don't know. There's something about it that just felt right with me. Like these, because they're in some place called Ulthar, and this, we'll say, band of gypsies type people come through, and they've got all their strange writing and symbols on their caravan, and bring this magic and stuff. And to me, it was kind of cool to have like that mystery and have the kid who has the cat, like the curse they end up putting on the town, like have it just be like this crazy cat that's kind of the one leading the whole thing. Just another way of kind of looking at the Lovecraft story. It's a good story just even by itself, but a lot of times when I read stuff, I start to think about like other things that could be going on, or like other ways to spin it a little bit. And like if I were going to illustrate it, like what would I do and how would I want to reflect it and still kind of show the story? Or do I want to show the story, or do I just want it to be kind of mysterious and hopefully draw you in, which is kind of more what I did here. I think if I were going to want to show you pieces of the story, I wouldn't have the cat riding the skull through space. It'd be more of maybe the caravan, or a bunch of cats, something that is more revealing. But I kind of like the mystery of things. And one of the things I usually do when I'm painting is I'm kind of painting for my childhood self, or just like what would have appealed to me as a kid. Like if I had seen this cover in a bookstore, I would have wanted to have known what the story was that was going on. So So here I'm putting in some rim lighting, or I was putting a rim lighting of the purple on the fur, and I'm still putting some in here on the tongue of the cat, just kind of bouncing the light around some more, just to get it to stand out a little bit more from the background and pull it away from all the blues. Get some of that purple in there, just to pop it out some more. Oh yeah, here's I decided to put kind of just like tiny little cosmos inside the eye sockets of the skulls. 'Cause I liked just the empty eye sockets, but it felt like it needed just a little bit more life. So I dropped those in there, and they're just kind of these little spirals of, stars or whatever you think is inside something like that. And then I wasn't happy with how dark the face of the cat was, so I just kind of dropped in a bunch of the lighter blue here, just to see, and it took it too far, but took it too far on purpose because I wanted to see if that was where I needed to go or if I needed to tone it down a bit. So here I'm starting on the first eye and getting some reflections in, and again kind of working in kind of a cosmos feeling inside the eyes, because I wanted them to seem like they were, like these cosmic mystical eyes from this crazy creature. I do end up rotating that one and flipping it around a little bit because I liked the purple being at the bottom, and it made more sense since the purple is coming from like the bottom right part of the piece, and then just having the high reflection, of the whites kind of dropping in, because there's all of these stars and planets everywhere that are throwing off light, and trying to make sure that they feel like they're, rounded three-dimensional objects, like they're actually eyeballs, not just flat colors. So that was kind of fun, like doing each one of those. Like there's a part of me that, like, I got the top one and kind of liked it. I was like, oh, I should just copy paste it and just drop that into all of them and just kind of tweak it a little. But I don't know, it just still doesn't feel right to me to do that. Like I want each one to be very different and to have its own energy and its own life that I put into it. So there are a lot of times where I think I'm going to copy paste something and then I end up just painting each thing on its own, and I always like the way it turns out better. Like it always is a little more random and has its own life, as I said. It's just something that I like doing. So here I'm cleaning up the cat's left front leg, or right leg as you're facing it. I cleaned it up a bit, as you can see, and added in some shadow and stuff like that. I didn't go into as much detail as I did on the opposite legs. I didn't feel like it really needed it because it was pretty drowned in purple and pinks, and you can kind of get the idea of what's going on. I didn't want everything to just be really detailed, and I didn't feel like it needed it. So I went in and reshaped some things just to make sure that your eye and your brain would read it as what it was supposed to be. But I definitely didn't go in and clean it up as much as I could have, or as much as the other side. But it's one of those things that you just kind of decide like how much you want to give to a particular section of a piece. And here I'm adding some more of the pink and purple rim lighting, and just to, keep it kind of wrapped around and keep things a little more three-dimensional and not sinking into the background too much. So what else am I doing here? Cleaning up the nose. Yeah, the nose got pretty sloppy there. I ended up messing with that a bit. Cats' noses, if you actually look at them, the shape is pretty weird, but I don't know. They probably think our nose shape is pretty weird, but it's just it's one of those things where you don't really think about it a lot until you actually have to paint it accurately, and then you have to go and find reference and make sure it looks right, because if it doesn't look right, then it won't look right, and people will notice. They'll be like, what's up with the nose? They might not necessarily know what's wrong with the nose, but it just won't feel right. And so here I am, as you can see, I just scaled up the cat's front right claw. I think I go in and drop in some shadows later too, but yeah, it's just one of those things where you jump around and fix things up. And here I'm fixing some of these little cosmos in the skull eyes and throwing in some more light in the eye sockets and in the nose cavity, a little bit underneath. Throwing in some more purple, some more reflective lighting from the underneath. Just trying to bring it together, but not have it be too distracting. And I didn't want to add too much purple to the skull, aside from the right side, because I didn't want to take away from that extreme blue and purple lighting effect, because I really like that, and I like the separation of the two. It just has a really nice feeling to it that I like. So here I'm laying in some more of the purple, and then I end up removing quite a bit of it and just having a little bit of highlight here and there. Here I'm cleaning up some of the background, obviously, adding in some more detail using the big brush that kind of spatters. And as you can see up in the top right of the image, like, I try to keep a palette of the main colors I'm using just sitting up top so I can just pull from them really quickly. So here I'm starting the symbol, which is kind of a Necronomicon type symbol. I just made a big selection, circular selection, and then painted the inside of it. And here I'm just freehand drawing some lines. I'm literally just making this up as I go, as far as what the shape is going to be and what the lines are going to be for this thing. Sometimes it goes quickly and sometimes it doesn't, but it usually comes pretty easily. And then I'm just writing out some writing, and this is, again, all just stream of consciousness writing. Like, I'm not referring to any alphabet. It can't be translated as far as I know. It's just stuff out of my head that I feel like would sit appropriately in this image, and would accompany it well as far as telling the story. And I ended up switching the colors of the text just by doing a color overlay, which is another good reason to do things on separate layers sometimes. Like, the text I did on different layers, and then I was just able to do a color overlay on that layer, and immediately I have a new color of text without the text being affected in any way. So that's a nice little cheat. And there I thought I was going to block in some more color around the outsides, but I ended up not really liking it, so I got rid of that. And here I'm building up a little bit more, like some nebula style stuff, just to give the background a little more depth. Yeah, more cleaning up, a lot of small bits of erasing, adding in some more details here and there. Placement's always a thing. I ended up having to move this stuff around a lot because I realized that once I got the text on it, that the cat and the skull seemed too small compared to the text. So I had to rescale some things. And there I'm adding whiskers. Yeah, going back, yeah, here I went back over all the lettering because I didn't like how faded out it was, because I did kind of a light version, so I went back and wrote over top of it again, just to bring it out a little bit more. And I also felt like it gives it a little bit more dimension, like maybe it's lit but it's fading, which I like with this style. You know, more of the same with the text down there. And yeah, then I did that with this larger symbol up top too. Yeah, adding more layers. Like at this point, oh yeah, I'm reshaping the cosmos in this skull. At this point, a lot of it's just playing around with things. Yeah, so here's a cat skull reference. I was thinking about doing a border, using a cat skull like kind of as a centerpiece. So here I'm kind of building it out and just doing it fairly quickly. Like obviously I just drew half and then flipped it horizontal, and then I'm dropping things over top of it just to even see if it's something I really want to do. You know, but for me that was a quick way of doing it. I probably could have just used a reference, but I like having it be in the same style so that when I try it I kind of know more what I'm getting. So yeah, I was just gonna have the skull either in the center at the top or in the corners. So just playing around with that stuff, and then just, you know, duplicating layers and scooting things around to see if I was liking it. And I ended up not using it. It just felt like it was, because I ended up adding, as you'll see here, I drew in some more symbols and some lines, and it just felt like it was containing everything too much. Sometimes I like the borders, but this one, like the background is so busy, and it's also in outer space, and having outer space be framed and like trying to contain it just wasn't really feeling right to me. So I ended up not using any of this, but I wanted to try it at least. So yeah, signature. Yeah, I don't have any of the stuff where I add the text, so I'm sorry about that. But other than that, yeah, that was the process for doing the painting. If you have any questions about anything, send me a message. I hope you liked it. Thank you very much for supporting me on Patreon, if you're supporting me on Patreon. And I guess we'll see what comes next. I've got a lot of stuff in the queue, so we'll see what I end up painting, and we'll do another video. And Scaricon is coming up for me right now. Today is June 2nd, 2019. Scaricon starts on the 7th, so less than a week away. So maybe I'll see you there. If not, maybe I'll see you at another convention. But thanks for watching. All right, later.